back, everyone, to the Authentic as Podcast. My name is San. I teach marketing and storytelling to entrepreneurs and creators. And in this podcast, we invite entrepreneurs and creators, and we hear their story and how their stories shape who they are, what they do, and how they do what they do. Today, we have Glo. Glo Atanmo is a creative entrepreneur, digital marketer, and founder of the Lively, a program that guides people in making big life transition. After venturing to almost 100 countries across 6 continents, her digital storytelling has landed her in Oprah Magazine, Forbes, while she's partnered with brands like Google, Facebook, Instagram, Target, Delta Airlines, GoPro, Adobe, and more on marketing campaigns that went and reached tens of millions of people. You can hear her down-to-earth advice on the Glo Show podcast, or watch her pep talk on YouTube to get fired up for your day. A sleep enthusiast, you can assume she's horizontal for at least 9 hours a night. She specializes in business coaching and creative strategy for multi-passionate entrepreneurs and splits her time between Bali and Boston. Yeah. Welcome, Glo. So good to see you.
So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I love the whole get up, the whole vibe. Thank you so much.
Of course. And the background is Bali inspired, and this is like my culture, Nigerian, just like style. So I wanted to bring the culture today.
That's amazing. I just came back from Africa, in Egypt. And like I really want to visit Nigeria because I have so many following there. I feel like it's one of those countries that creators never visit to a talk or anything like that.
You know, it's so funny. I had a friend that told me, like, I want to visit, Nigeria. Give me tips. I was like, don't go. But I say this lovingly. I just don't think Nigeria is set up for tourism. And, I've been back, to visit family. And there are so many things that you're like, y'all could just, if there's, but I think sometimes countries, they exist for people to experience versus to, I don't want to say exploit, but like, photo of this, photo of that. It's like Nigeria is a full experience. That means the traffic, the rudeness, the yells, the elders pointing fingers at you on the street that have no idea who you are, the bowing to people. Like, it's an experience. So you have to go with a Nigerian. You can't go by yourself.
Yeah. So when you travel to these countries, do you usually like stay away from the tourist things and you try to like really experience it?
Yeah, in the beginning, my first solo trip was 2012, so 12 years ago, and it was to London. So of course, that's very touristy for many people, and everything about it was different for me. So of course, the tourist traps, the Big Ben, the London Bridge, I did all of that. And I think it took me maybe until my 3rd or 4th year of traveling solo, where I started to get brave enough to venture to places that other people weren't going to, like Albania or Montenegro, Slovakia, and in those countries, I felt like I was able to have like really authentic experiences.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Were you scared, like as a solo female traveler? Like
that's such, I think the greatest fear always came when it's interesting. I'm more afraid in some places in the US than I am in other countries. There's something about when you're different, I would recognize, like, let's say in Albania, like, Albania's, their history is so complex, but it's also filled with a lot of gore and a lot of tragedy and a lot of war. And so the average person might be like, don't go to Albania, it's so dangerous. But when I went there, there was so much honor and surprise. People are like, you came all the way here just to spend your tourist dollars with us? There was so much gratitude. And so when I was met with that level of gratitude, how can I be afraid? So it was like one country at a time where I was able to like, oh, this isn't scary. It's literally just the news that only shows this country's name when they're going through a war.
That's true. That's so true that I always see something about the news and then I go there and it's like, what? It's totally not like what I expected, like so many times.
Exactly. But, it's all of us, because that's how I was at first, too. Like I had no-go countries. I was like, no, I've seen the news. And then you meet someone from there and then they give you a whole different narrative. And you're like, okay, maybe I can visit.
I guess that makes sense because like whenever there's like a flood or when we had a blackout or in New York, my mom always calls me like, "Are you like?" They make it seem like it's so bad, but I'm like, "What? No, it's trust me, it's not nearly as bad as what it looks like on TV. Like I'm fine. There's no water in my, my apartment.
That's it. And interestingly enough, and we'll probably get to this, but I was going to be a pre-med major because my mom wanted me to be a doctor. As a Nigerian immigrant kid, I was going to do the right thing. But later I changed to interdisciplinary communications, mass media, and design. And through that, I did radio, I did broadcast journalism, and I wrote for the newspaper in my city. And I remember just that lesson of if it bleeds, it leads. Start with the goriest story, start with the most tragic story, start with the sadness and the death. And we were literally taught, and it was ingrained in our psyche to like everything is tragic and like overhype what everything is. And so I'm coming out on the other side of that. Like this is my formal education. So of course I'm being a good student and taking everything in and thinking this is what it's supposed to be like. And then on the consumer side, as I like go through life, I'm like, wait, that's incredibly toxic. We are literally taught to do this. And I'm so glad I didn't follow broadcast journalism, but like I get to see it on the consumer side. And I'm like, I see like what it does to us and how much fear it creates in us.
And I guess that's kind of the point for them because
ratings.
So let's go back a little. I want to hear about your upbringing, like your childhood, like your parents, what your parents were like, and like kind of immigrating here. I'm also immigrant, so immigrating here. How were you in school? All of that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I started to realize, immigrant kids, we all kind of have similar stories of like, well, let me not project, but there's trauma sprinkled.
Yeah. Quickly, when you said that before, you feel more comfortable in other countries. I always felt more comfortable around other immigrants, even if they're not from Korea, even if like Nigeria, like doesn't matter. I felt way more comfortable around immigrants than like Americans for some reason.
That's it. There's like a layer of grit. There's a layer of like perseverance. There's a layer of hustle because your parents had to make so many sacrifices to come to a country, learn the language, learn how to navigate, learn society's rules, the unspoken rules. So in that regard, I respect and give so much credit to my parents for navigating that. And I was born in 1990. They immigrated around 1980-ish, 1981 maybe. And it was interesting. I just remember like my oldest sister, she was dressed in boys' clothes, not because, my parents couldn't shop for girls' clothes, but it was like, it was cheaper and it was easier to just find and so my oldest sister carries that trauma of having to dress like a boy through elementary school. And then we had 6 kids total. So of course, we're a family of 8 in a 3-bedroom condo. And we're sharing everything, clothes, food, rooms, no sense of privacy, no sense of ownership. And I have middle child syndrome as the third kid, which is like, I was always forgotten. The oldest, gets attention, the youngest gets attention, and then the middle, figure it out, go somewhere and figure it out. And so that manifested in school into rebellious behavior. I would lash out at the teacher. I would if someone looked at me in class, granted, I'm like 10, but if they looked at me in class, I'm like, see me outside, see me out fucking side, I'll beat your ass. And you're probably like, what, Glo? I was, who you see today? Whole different person. I had so much anger inside because I was like, I don't belong in the home. I don't belong in school. Why am I here? I hated my life. I hated who I was. I was like much chubbier. I had these like big chipmunk cheeks and I had buck teeth. So I would like walk around. I don't know if they get the video, but I'm like blowing up my cheeks. So I just always felt like, man, it sucks to be alive. I never remember through my teenage years being grateful or excited or happy that I was a human, that I was in this world. I just always felt like, gosh, I got no, like I didn't win any lottery ticket. A lot of girls at a young age, we kind of like navigate life knowing that if we can get ahead by being pretty, we'll take that as far as possible. And so at an early age, I recognized I did not have pretty privilege. I was not going to be able to be in that lane. And I was such a late bloomer. My body didn't really develop till I was like 27, but I was like really overweight. So I was just a very clunky, awkward kid. So I had all of this anger in me. And so my parents, like, bless their heart, my dad was a pastor, my mom was a nurse. So just doing their best to just work hard and provide for their family. But I imagine Nigerian people, especially in their era, they had survived the Biafra War. It's a very tragic war in Nigeria, like a civil war that happened. And the emotional intelligence, the nurturing, the gentleness, that was not embedded in our culture or in parenting. So when things are wrong, you get whooped, you get yelled at, you get smacked. It was very like harsh. And so you grow up thinking that's normal, but then you also, what I didn't realize, grew up with this level of self-hatred because now it's reinforced that you're not good enough or you're not this. And I remember I started to realize the first time I felt like my mom had like love for me was when I got good grades. I'm like, okay, let me try. Like, school is not that hard. Like, I don't mind, trying. And so I got good grades and she was like, oh, Gloria, wow, this is so good. Oh my God. Oh, good for you. Your teacher must be proud. Oh my God. And she's just joyful as ever. I was like, who is this woman? I'm like, this is not my mother. But I soon was like, oh, accomplishment, good grades, like doing good in school gets the love. And so then I grow into this form of like accomplishment junkie, feeling like I'm only worthy of love if I'm accomplishing things, if I'm getting ahead, if I'm doing well, if I'm ambitious. And again, it goes back to that immigrant child, these parallel upbringings that we have, where because our parents sacrificed so much, we wouldn't dare disappoint them by messing up the opportunity of getting an education, growing up in a different neighborhood, having more opportunities. So yeah, I guess I'm saying a lot, and I'm sure you have some follow-up. So I'll wrap up the upbringing part by just saying that my parents did the best that they could, but I recognized the trauma that it created was never feeling worthy of just existing. Love was something earned through accomplishment.
Wow, it's so amazing how parallel are. Because I actually was surprised that my video editor is actually in Ghana, and we know a lot of people in Nigeria, and like the culture there is very actually similar to Korean, with the like the work ethic and all of that. Also the co-grading, right? Like that's the only validation I got, and I feel like, so you know how Tony Robbins asked, whose love did you want more, your dad or your mom? Mm-hmm. Like which one was that for you?
Definitely my mom. Yeah, my dad was scary. I felt like we grew up fearing our dad. He was a pastor. He had like just a domineering voice. So for sure, my mom.
Did you have any hobbies growing up or anything that you wanted to be like?
Yeah, I'm grateful that when I was 9, my dad took me to the tennis courts, and this is like in the era of the Williams sisters. So he's like, okay, I see these Black girls making it in tennis. Maybe my daughters could also make it. So I actually got really good in tennis, and I won like lots of trophies in varsity for high school. I got a scholarship to play tennis in college and basketball. So I was a dual collegiate athlete for basketball and tennis. Wow. So yeah, it was really fun. Like I recognized that like, at least with sports, I could judge myself based off like my effort, not the result. So if I work hard, if I work out hard, if I just give my best, I could still feel proud of my effort. And then at 11 years old is when I created my first blog. So back then there was a platform called Xanga with an X, Xanga. Yeah, it is now defunct. I've tried to like download and archive my posts, but it's just non-existing. But I remember in elementary school, we had switched elementary schools. And yeah, I just, didn't have friends. I was the African kid. We were in a school or a district that was like 80% white, maybe 10% Asian, and then 5% like other African, just other. So
that's high in Asian. 10% Asian is pretty high.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it's funny because my best friend back then was a Filipino chick,
Oh,
Angelia
okay.
Makatiag. Yeah, she was incredible, and she just saw me like as a loner, and I think she took pity on me, and she was like, "Okay, let someone has to talk to this, kid in the corner." But what was nice is that during recess, I would ask my teacher, Miss Root, like, hey, is it okay if I stay in class with you? Because that feeling of going outside and people are doing hopscotch, jumping rope, on the seesaw, tetherball, and you're just like, I don't belong anywhere. No one has accepted me or invited me. I can't just like stand in the corner. So Miss Root, bless her heart, she was like, yeah, of course. And in California at the time, Apple had passed this law, or California passed a law that allowed Apple Macintosh computers to be sent to these elementary schools in certain districts. So thank God I was a part of that district. So we had these colorful boxed Macintosh computers that, there was maybe 4 in our classroom. And I was like, okay, like AskJeeves.com and Yahoo.com and AOL, like this was that era. And Xanga, I eventually like discovered. I was like, oh, I can have this kind of like Tumblr wasn't really too popular, but Xanga was kind of, Xanga, Tumblr, Blogspot, and then eventually MySpace. And so I was an early adopter for all of these platforms because for me, it was my ticket to connection. So when people talk about digital storytelling and like, oh, I hate social media and the algorithm, I'm like, it is a ticket to freedom. It is creative expression. It is not my end game. For me, I need an outlet. I have gone through so much. I have so many stories. I have so much that I want to share and I don't want to keep it in my head. So it is a place for me selfishly. So when people are so like, just, I don't know, not even results driven, because it's good to have goals. But when people are so linear focused on what social media is for, I'm like, you're missing the point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it because I feel like I meet two kinds of people. Ones where they're like forced to do social media, so they're like, and then the people who are like are naturally like on social media. And a lot of these people kind of are like you, where they started at a young age, and as soon as they saw the tools, they're like, oh, this makes sense, and they started sharing. And two questions:
Yeah.
what kind of stuff did you write about? And then was it more of a one-way thing, or was it like kind of a community where you're kind of having a conversation with people?
So funny. I'm not proud, but boys that were cute, homework that I hated, and teachers that sucked. Those were like my content pillars at 11 years old. And
Makes perfect sense.
it's so amazing. And my username, it had like every other letter was capitalized, but it was I'm a lil black balla holla. So again, the caliber of the content, not my best, not my proudest moment, but an outlet nonetheless. And I think my first follower or out of state follower, I remember was from Virginia. And that was the first time I was like, oh, and we developed this like just messaging back and forth. She was a similar age, she had similar struggles. She kind of liked that my writing was very like witty and sarcastic and humorous. She loved my style of writing. So we just kept in communication, like just sharing like, how was your day at school? And it was like a pen pal, but digitally. And it was so fun. And I don't think I built too many like natural, authentic connections. I think eventually like more people in the school started creating Xanga accounts. And then we all kind of transferred to like Blogspot. So I kept like finding different pockets of communities. And then there would be people from my school that would be following me mostly. So yeah. It was interesting.
It's so interesting because when I first moved here, I never knew that I was like weird or anything like that. But because I moved here and I compare myself to all the regular Americans, I'm like, oh, I'm so like, I always felt like I was weird, right?
Yeah.
Ever since I moved here. And I really had a terrible childhood too. And for me, all the way through high school, I'm like, I can't wait till I get out of here. Like, I was like, I kept waiting for my life to start.
Oh, wow.
Because I felt like my life is going to start once I go to college or something like that. Did that, right?
Oh, touche. Sorry.
Did you kind of have that feeling at all? Or?
We're so polite. That's the immigrant upbringing. I feel like we have like manners embedded in us. We have this like if elders in Nigeria, we like prostrate for them, like we're almost like our foreheads
Oh, I didn't
touching
know
the
that.
floor. It's very it's good saying good morning to a stranger like is very common in our culture. So I will, credit to Nigeria because I definitely
Didn't.
bashed them in the beginning, but the manners that we have and the respect that's within our culture is unmatched, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Feeling like I was waiting for life to begin, absolutely. Like I hated school. I was good at it, but I hated the structure and the format because every classroom was a reminder that I don't belong in any of these spaces. There were the jocks, the cheerleaders, the nerds, the immigrant kids, always kind of like individual outcasts because we all had to do good in school because our parents forced us to. So there were all of these pockets that didn't affirm my identity. And so I felt myself in this chameleonic way navigating like, okay, when I'm with the cheerleaders, I had to talk a little bit like this and be, oh my God, and just tell them how pretty they were. And like, I'm like turning into this person that I'm not, but I know that it allows me to stay at the table. And I'm like, this doesn't feel fun. And who am I without needing the validation or affirmation from all of these random people who are also figuring life out? So I think that journey, and that's why solo travel was such a big component of my healing, because that journey of figuring out who I was and learning to love that version took years. And I don't think we ever allow ourselves like spaces to fully unpack what do I actually believe about this? Or am I still adopting my mother's opinion of it? What do I actually think about this? Or is it something that I borrowed? Is it a belief that I borrowed from someone else because it was convenient? So just having more questions than answers sometime in life is
Yeah.
hard, but it's necessary. Yeah.
Looking back now, were there anything that from your childhood that was like, I used to believe this false belief, but now I don't believe it anymore. And is there like some event that happened that made you realize that?
Wow. That's a great question. Wow. The first thing that comes to mind, I think that I'm having like three thoughts at once and I'm trying to figure out, can I combine them or should I just pick one of the three?
We have time. You can do all three.
Oh man, what a beautiful question. I think the greatest belief I've had to unpack probably had to be around my understanding of why people were the way they were. And I'll explain that. So maybe when I'm a child, I'm told to like, you're molded in these different ways because like that's the right thing to do. And so you grow up as an adult with all of these unspoken beliefs and unspoken truths. And you're like, wait, but who's confronting the truths? Like who created these unspoken rules? Like actually, why can't I opt out? And I'll give an example. Transactional friendships and transactional relationships. I remember I was a part of 6 years ago, really powerful mastermind, just incredible people and still have respect for everyone. But I remember it getting to a point where it looked and felt so transactional that there was no joy in the room. And I was like, are we treating our people like humans or are they numbers in your funnel to get to your revenue goals and your bottom line? Like I just completely disrupted the room and I sliced it in half with tension of like, what are we all doing? Like, is this real? Like, and I was like, oh wait, I can see that there are some people that felt that, but they don't say it because they need to stay connected. Whereas I don't care. I will burn the bridge and build a new one tomorrow because my integrity is not for sale. And I will always stick up for what I believe is right. Sorry, I got
Wow, that's so amazing. Because I've had moments like few moments like that too, and we're very similar in that way. Because I will always speak my mind, and I've always had moments like that, and usually like half the room be like, "Oh my, I was just thinking that," or you know what I mean?
They come up to you after. They're like, I'm so glad you said it. And I'm like, and why didn't you? Like, I don't have to always be the disruptor. Like, if more of us use our voice to like challenge like the status quo and what people are getting away with, which is sometimes toxic and manipulative behavior, we have a better world.
Yeah, to me, that's what leadership is, right?
Yeah.
Being the first one to speak up when everyone else is afraid. Kind of like when you watch Hunger Games and Katniss is like, I volunteer. Everybody's like, what? but they got inspired. Like I bet you inspired them to be more authentic, and you were leading by example.
It's so wild because I never would have considered it that, but I remember there was an entrepreneur, and she, I mean, 8 if not 9 figures in revenue a year, like really powerful person. And I remember she came up to me, she was like, Glo, I don't think you realize how much you're such an example of like where I'm weak or where I need to grow. And it blew my mind because I'm like, what? Like, you have everything. Like, you have all the connections, all the access. Like, what do you mean you're learning from me? Because at that time I was still, just barely crossed 7 figures. And I think what that taught me is like, you can make all the money in the world, but you can never skip the character development, the integrity, the mirror that you have to look in every day and say, am I happy with the version of myself that I'm becoming in pursuit of these massive financial goals? Because I always tell my clients, money is the easiest part of the journey. I promise you, once you unlock it, money becomes the easiest part. Keeping your integrity intact every part of the way, that's where everyone loses it. Oh, everyone crumbles because we're so quick to just be like, oh, I just got to keep my voice silent. Oh, I just got to avoid that. Oh.
I 100% know what you mean, because for me, like you said, throughout high school and, in front of these girls, you have to, hey, like you have to play that part. Like I did that, right? Yeah. I literally did that early, like first 25, 30 years of my life. I always felt like I was wearing a mask, being afraid to be found out or something that I like. And then slowly I changed and I was like, whatever, I'll just say what I'll be myself. So I had that transition. Was there some part of your life where you were like, okay, now I'm just going to be me and like, I'm not going to care about what I live,
Yeah, probably end of 2021. That's when I turned my DMs off and I no longer made it my responsibility to engage with everyone who did the privilege of following me. And that sounds harsh, but I was like, people are now, there's no home training on social media. People will bark at you because of their own triggers and their own issues and their own traumas. And now with ManyChat, and I would love to even go off on this tangent later on, but with ManyChat, we're training our audience to bark demands at us, and then we feed them whatever it is they want. But like, let's say our ManyChat is off and someone, likes your shirt. That's all they type in, shirt. And you're like, I don't even have a funnel or an automation set up. Like, what is shirt? Like, and like pretty soon people will literally just be barking words at us, like these 1-word comments. And one thing that you will see, because I've never archived a post in 13 years that I've been on Instagram. I don't hide my likes. I want people to see everything. But you will never see 1-word comments in any of my posts because I've never turned on automations, because I've never wanted to train my people to bark demands at me. Because I already know how entitled most of people on social media are, feeling like, oh, what's that plant? Give me the link to that plant. Oh my God, that shirt, give me the link. I'm here to talk about my grieving grandmother, and you're asking for a link to my shirt. Fuck off. Bro, authentic as fuck, right?
How do you handle that? Because I feel like that too. And then I see like these marketers talking about like, you have to be using ManyChat, you have to have this funnel and all those things. And I start to feel FOMO. I'm like, I'm missing out. Like I should be doing all of these things. Like I should be doing automation. I should be doing all of that. Like, so how do you ever feel that? Or
I think I had this realization maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Anytime I feel forced or pressured to do something, it's always from scarcity mentality. Like abundance thinking always makes room for like, in my own time, I'll find my own system. That system might work for them, but I can find a system that works for me. Like there's an abundance of options, and there will never be one specific thing that will be the meal ticket to my riches and empire. And then the second thing I realized is, there are incredible people that have built, million subscriber empires, digital empires, lots of followers, lots of really engaged audiences. And they have that responsibility as well of hundreds of thousands of people. And I got to a point where I was like making great money in my business, but also every now and then I would have a bad apple slip through, and a little bit entitled, demanding, weren't showing up, weren't, attending the calls. And so I had to start to like say, okay, I'm now in a season where the money no longer motivates me. So now let me find a way to make this as enjoyable as possible. So I'm going to adjust my prices so that I'm only working with X amount of people. And in these X amount of spaces, there's going to be an application process because now I get to choose my clients. They don't just get to like pay me money because they have it. I'm going through their page. I'm like, okay, their captions, does it look like they're in therapy? Okay, oh, they teach, they're on there, because I want to be able to enjoy what I do. I fucking love this shit. I will talk creative marketing, digital strategy, entrepreneurship all day long for fun. So if I'm going to be doing it with other people that are paying like top dollar, I want it to be an enjoyable, energetic exchange.
Oh yeah, I love that. Like I think a lot of people really needs to hear that because I do feel like you said, that whole transactional thing.
Yeah.
I feel like in our industry, especially, I feel like it's kind of it's a little bit toxic, and every time I meet somebody, I feel it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's so tough because like that's how they were taught or that's how they expect things to go. And it's not until we challenge like each other's behavior and we call each other in and say like, hey, like what if we did coffee and we don't talk about, funnel hacking. We just like ask each other about each other's marriages and families and trips that we want to take, creating context in the relationship of or friendships that we have.
And I also feel like in my business, like most of our clients, we have close relationship with them. You don't need to be friends with millions of people. Like I feel like for networking, it's more about how deep a relationship can you build with, few people that you can really work with or something.
That's exactly it. And it reminds me of a struggle I had because, you follow someone, mutually follow each other for years and you have respect for them. And then you start to say, oh, okay, let's navigate this friendship offline. And this also could be for a client. Maybe they're in a program and you recognize like, oh, they're a cool person. Let's see if we could be friends in real life. And then in real life, you recognize that maybe it's a personality preference that you were hoping for, or just misalignment in core values, whatever the reason. Now it becomes so much harder to like have that conversation of like, we tried to make this work and it's nothing personal, but it's not working and let's not force it. And it doesn't have to be weird. But I think something that we've done, and I have a couple of friends who have done this too, that told me that they were also struggling, is that we try to rush these friendships online to offline, and it always like stumbles because the foundation was never solid. It was all digital. And we need to have a new foundation of like screening and meeting people because this ain't working.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like I think everybody thought that, oh, like with Zoom, we can do everything online, blah, blah, blah. I feel like we're starting to see that the hidden benefits of in-person meetings and, things like that, right?
It truly, and I've always done for the last, I guess, 7 years, these like intimate boot camps and intimate retreats, because I recognize that there were some types of transformations as well that I wanted to have offline. I have this metric where everyone on my retreat or my boot camp has to cry. I don't tell them that up front, but that's my expectation because that's how moving I want the experience to be. Yeah. And so when the last person finally sheds that tear, I'm like, all right, check, and I'll ring the bell. And they're like, what's happening? And I'm like, we're crying, we're bonding. This is human. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, because it's so much more than just helping people with their business and marketing strategy. It's like helping people heal, helping people understand why they want to build something and finally be seen on the internet.
Wow, that's so. When I first started Night Owl Nation to teach storytelling, I was like, I'm gonna stay away from the woo stuff and I'm gonna stay away from like the therapy stuff. But then quickly I realized that you can't really do storytelling without going deeper, without going to your traumas, without going to those places. You really can't.
Oh yeah, it's so interconnected. And mind you, you might have some people that are like, no, give it to me, just strategy and funnels and marketing. Like, I just need that stuff. And then like they'll come around and be like, actually, it's been hard and life is a lot. And it's just, you got to make space for it eventually.
I want to hear like how you went from, after you graduated to traveling and becoming a blogger. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I studied abroad because I was a pre-med major for the first 2 years, and then I quickly learned that wasn't for me. I went to the two departments of communication and mass media, and I said, can we create something interdisciplinary? Because social media was not an industry. There was no, like, Twitter existed, but like that was social media. Facebook existed, that was social media. But no one saw it as like a marketing channel for
That
business. And immediately I was like, I think there's something here, but there were no job posting for social media managers or anything. So I was kind of like a pioneer in saying, okay, well, I feel like with all of these sets of classes and credits, I'll find a job. Like I'll create a job from this. And so it took me 5 years to graduate because I had the 2 years of pre med that I wasted. And in that fifth year, in US universities, you can only play sports for 4 years. So in that fifth year, my sports eligibility was up with basketball and tennis. So I was just a student and I could fully focus on studies. And then one person one day tells me, like, Glo, you should study abroad. Like, you really should check it out. And in my mind, my limited thinking, my limited perception of what's possible for Black people in America, I was like, oh, that's what rich white people do. Like, no, that's not for me. Like, what? I like laughed in their face. I was like, okay, yeah, like, what? And I remember thinking, like, okay, if I at least attend the seminar, maybe I'll learn more, but I still don't feel like I could afford it or like it's for me. I attend the seminar, the brochure and pamphlets, like all white people, of course, maybe like one token Asian. But
probably like a very whitewashed station.
probably the same Asian face for the last like 40 years. They just keep putting him on updated. But yeah, I just saw the lack of diversity in study abroad. And so I just didn't feel like it was something Black people did. And as immigrants, like Black people or Africans specifically, we traveled for immigration or survival. There wasn't leisure travel that I was aware of. So again, just, limiting beliefs. But I attended and I remember feeling like, okay, if I don't have sports this year, let me at least, apply. I applied, I was accepted, and it was like I had 4 months to prepare. And I was so like, what? Like, this is, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And here's the kicker. My dad passes away in a diabetic coma in Nigeria 2 weeks before my flight. And so all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's no, like, this is a sign. Like, oh my God, like, oof. I just couldn't even like think about myself at the time. I had to be there for my family. We're a family of now 7. And all of the funeral arrangements, like, are we doing the funeral in Nigeria or are we bringing him to the US? And the context for why he was in Nigeria is because he got deported. My mom did it the legal way. She filed for the green card, paid all the fees. He wanted to try to, do it his own way and then pay later. And, it just doesn't always work out like that. So I think that the sentence they gave him was a 10-year deportation. And then in the 10th year, he could reapply for a green card. And mind you, they're still married at this time. So my mom is flying to visit him every few years. So when he passed away, it was also the 10th year where he was set to reapply for the visa to come back to the US. So there was so much confusion and chaos. I just felt like it was selfish of me to still go to England to study abroad. But I remember my university, there was a board of trustee member and then the university president. They heard about my dad passing. They sent me an email and they were like, Glo, we can't imagine, like, our condolences. We can't imagine like what you're feeling right now. I just want to let you know, I can see your balance because at the time I was fully like athletic scholarship. So because my 5th year, there were no athletic scholarships coming in, I was like, I think I had like 10 to 15K that I still needed to pay for next semester. And I was like still trying to think of how I would cover it. They're like, we saw your balance. We're going to write you the check. Please go to England. Like, you have done so much for the university. You are in the newspaper. You do broadcast, like you're on the radio. You work with the marketing department. You are such a leader on campus. It would be an honor for us to gift you this experience. And when I tell you the tears, it was so overwhelming. And I think that was the first time I realized the value of just being a leader and stepping up without any reward. I was that person that I was like resourceful, reliable. People can always count on me to show up for them. And so when I told my mom, like, she had I think that was also one of the few times where she was like supportive of the decision, because up until that point, I still hadn't told her because I was thinking she would tell me no. And so now when I show her, I'm like, the school wrote a check for me to pay for it. Like everything is covered. So that was that. So in the 4 months that I'm in the UK, oh, go ahead. Okay.
Did that surprise your mom too? Yeah.
You know, I think she always knew that I was like a standout kid, but I didn't stand out in the ways she wanted. So she was like, okay, this is nice to hear, but she's still not going to be a doctor. So I'm still disappointed.
There's no Asian parents. Well, I guess Nigerian parents.
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't enough, but it was like, I'll acknowledge that this is a great gesture and not everyone would get this kind of benefit.
Before we go into the UK part of your story, okay. I have a few things I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, of course.
Your leadership, because you did sports, you did broadcast, so you did all of these activities and you were very active in school. Is that something that, did you know that you were kind of, I guess, not normal in that sense? Like that, you're not doing the average amount of, like you're actually going overperforming, or is that something that you didn't realize?
That's a great question. So I was born and raised in California. Then I went to high school in Arizona, Phoenix. And then I went to college in Kansas, a city called Baldwin City. And I remember thinking of Kansas as like, okay, it's a flyover state, not many Black people. It's just not very diverse, but like I have a chance to start over. And I remember feeling like, okay, let me use college as my chance to like make a name for myself. So like, I picked up my first digital DSLR camera and I would just go to like the volleyball games and I would take pictures of like all the athletes, make sure I get like really nice individual photos of them, upload it to Facebook and tag them, and then give the raw files to the coach and just kind of say, hey, here, if you need a market, here, use this as you need. And then I started to learn Adobe Photoshop. And I started creating like individual posters for like new seasons. And again, not even charging, just kind of like as like a way to pass time and kind of explore this graphic design interest that I started to develop. So yeah, I was just like attending sports games. I was attending leadership stuff. I like volunteered for community events on the weekend. And I think for me, it was just like, let me just see what happens if I just show up fully in every way I can and just make the room and the space a little bit brighter.
And you weren't expecting that kind of result. You weren't thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a leader.
No, not at all. I think for me, I also I still was trying to figure out who I was and where I belonged. And interestingly enough, the Black people at that college were like, I didn't even fit in with them. So I was like, okay, let me just remove titles and like circles from my identity and just be me in everywhere that I go. And then pretty soon, like all these different groups flocked to me. Oh my gosh, it's Glo, come over here, come sit with the, and people are like not fighting over me, but like everyone wanted like me to be a part of them. And so I just got along really well with everyone.
Wow. That's such a great lesson that you learned in that time, because you found out that just by being you and doing that, that's the best way to attract people. Not by trying to attract. Like I feel like whenever I'm trying to force somebody to like me or something like that, it just never works.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's the easiest way to have like a messed up power dynamic, because there's someone that you follow on social media and you're like, oh, I just want them to like me. And I remember when someone powerful for the first time, like a powerful person, like followed me back, I literally started to change my content to please them. I was like, oh, the pressure. Okay. I have to make sure that I don't post stupid shit and that everything is valuable in education. And I was like, why am I trying to force them to like me more? Like they're already like, if they unfollow me, who cares? But like, Glo, just keep being you. That was enough for them to follow you.
How long did it take you? Because I feel like I'm still there. I feel like I'm still like subconsciously I'm thinking about, oh, this person is going to see my content. Like, how did you get over that?
When I lost the freedom and joy in posting, I was like, I'm posting for other people. I'm not posting for myself anymore. So maybe there can be a balance where you're like, okay, 70% of my content is valuable for my community and for the people I admire. And then 30% is for me. Let it be a low engagement and low performing post, but it's for me because I enjoyed it. It's cool to look at. I had fun creating it, you know?
Yeah. I feel like I'm slowly getting there because now, like when a post doesn't perform, it doesn't really bother me anymore. So
Nice. Good. You know, no one can escape the algorithm. Like it's going to happen to all of us where we just get low engagement. And I've seen people like pay for boosting their follower count, sorry, their like count. Like if you click on it, you'll see a bunch of Pakistani and Indian faces. And I'm like, it makes me trust them less because I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like, let your community, let them judge you for that. Those aren't people you want to serve. Like, but just show up as you, because if you pay for this now, what are you going to pay for down the line? If you compromise your integrity in the beginning, it will always be compromised in the future.
That's so true. Like, yeah. And that's how I felt like during that first 25 years of my life. I feel like I had to always do another lie to cover up for another lie. And I just felt like I was living a lie.
There it is. We have to free ourselves. Whatever shame that we're carrying, like own our shame and own the narrative. Because when we release our own shame first, no one else can carry the narrative for us. And so powerful.
Oh, I love that.
Because you told the story first, so you get to own the narrative.
Yeah, I love it. It's like Eminem in 8 Mile when he rap battles.
He just completely destroyed himself. It disarmed the other person. Like, oh shit, I ain't got nothing to say now.
Yeah, and I've actually noticed that in client work too. Sometimes I had a client, and we have a disagreement, and I'm coming with all my like ammo. Like, this is what I'm gonna do to debate him, and blah blah blah. But then one day I just like said, "You're right." And just it completely changed because she's not understanding. Actually, no, I understand where you're coming, and it just completely. And that was like a very important moment for me in working with clients.
Wow, I love that you came to that realization. And I mean, no matter how many years someone has been coaching, like you're always going to have like a few people where it's like there's tension or friction, and it could just be like a personality mismatch. And what I've learned from those clients that are like a little bit harder to like get through or harder to work with is that there's something deeper that you might not even be aware of that they're still fighting. And so because they can't win that battle, they feel like they have to domineer and win every other battle. Maybe they're losing the battle of being a good mother, losing the battle of showing up for their husband. Like there's all these other battles they're fighting. So they're like, I need to win this one and tell you why posting on social media is useless. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, a lot of times it's them trying to prove themselves within their company. Okay, so let's move on to the UK part and the travel, like how you got started in traveling.
Yeah, so when I was there as a student, again, that like leadership role in me, but then also me feeling like I would never travel again, I applied to be an ambassador, a resident assistant, and a blogger for the university. And I got all 3 positions. I was busy. So I was a student.
What you wish for.
I was a student, but then I was also all of these like roles. And I remember the president of the study abroad university, he saw how people, this is where I started to like the power started to get to my head. I was like, I'm an ambassador. I can do this. I can do that. So let's say we had the campus pub, like it's supposed to close at 1 a.m. I'm like, everybody, 1 more hour. Fuck it. We can do what we want. Let's go. Turn the music. And so I'm like, and people are like, yeah, if Glo says it, the ambassador. And so now I'm like kind of abusing my power, but obviously in like fun ways. And so it gets back to the president, like that I'm, being a little bit mischievous. And he was like, he comes up to me during lunch. And he was like, I've heard lots about you. I see the work you're doing and you're incredible, but I also see that you're a troublemaker and I'm going to keep my eye on you. And he said it with like a chuckle and a smile. So he could tell that like I got a lot of people's respect by being me and just trying to, if someone's in the corner, I'm talking to them. If someone is like sitting alone at lunch, I'm eating lunch with them. I was that person. So he saw the leadership qualities I embodied, but also saw how if they go unchecked, they can wreak havoc. And mind you, I'm like 21. So it's also like, I'm still learning how to be a little, an adult and more mature. So I was I was there for 4 months as a student with those 3 roles. And then immediately after, like towards the end of that program, they had an opening for an intern for the next year. That was kind of like multimedia intern. And so I created this entire like pitch deck and like showed them all the ways social media could revolutionize the university. I gave them like a full Instagram strategy, Facebook strategy, video marketing strategy, and all of this was like underutilized. So I remember I created this end of year campaign where I rallied all the students together to create this like dance video. And everything was just so like, when I look back, I'm like, man, I had so much fun, like taking ownership of being a visionary, but also having that integrator execution part of me that like followed through. And they had no choice but to I don't want to say they had no choice, but they recognized how much of an asset I would bring. So I was hired a year later. So as soon as I graduated, I went back to be an intern. And the way the UK residency is set up and visas and stuff, I had like 1 week after my internship ended to like leave and go somewhere where I was legal on a tourist visa. And I remember looking at my bank account because I'm maximizing all the trips, all the travel, trying to do as much as I can because I lived with this feeling of like, I'm never going to do this again. I'll never be able to afford this again. This is all I have. And I remember I had like $75 in my US dollars in my bank account. There was a $40 flight to Spain. So I booked a one-way ticket to Barcelona on easyjet.com. And I remember getting a hostel for like $7 that night. And I go to my website. I had theblogabroad.com was like my domain. And I created it that same year. And I see that my website is up for renewal and it's like another $15 or $20. But I remember looking at my bank account and saying, that's it. Like if I spend to renew this website that has no traffic, barely any view, like there's no growth or momentum, but it was like a passion project. If I spend my last to renew this domain, I have nothing to eat and nowhere to stay tomorrow. And so I remember it was probably till like 2 or 3 a.m. I cried myself to sleep because I was like, how the fuck did I get here? Just like shit, like, what do I tell my mom? Like, of course, I'm like afraid that like she's going to be, I told you so. If you became a doctor, all you had to do was listen to me. I told you to do it. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I'd rather be homeless than give my mom the gratification that doing what she told me was the right way for me. Yeah. So the next day I was like, all right, bought it. I was like, I believe in this blog. And I remember like going on Google Maps and researching like neighborhoods, and checkout was like maybe 1 p.m. And I didn't have much. I had like a small suitcase. So I remember putting my suitcase in storage just in case. I'm like, if I don't want to walk around with it all day, at least it's somewhere. And I go to this neighborhood, I go on Google Translate and I memorize a script because I didn't know much Spanish by then. But I memorized this script of like, hola, soy Gloria, enseñar tu hijos inglés. I can teach your kids Spanish. Soy americana, I'm an American woman, like, 20 euros per hour. And I knock for maybe 40 minutes and it's like no answers, people saying no, kids aren't home, come back. And then one family who like, whether their kid was homeschooled or something, kid was there literally eating breakfast. Like, oh, vamos, yeah, entra, sí, ahora. And they literally on the spot paid me 20 euros. And I had my first lesson in that moment. When I tell you, I had no lesson plan. I just had the script. So when I tell you, like, there is something about entrepreneurship that forces you to reach into the depth of your fear and go for it. I had no other options. It was like, Glo, figure it out. Like, you are chasing this dream. You are building this blog. You are building this brand. You have no clue how yet, but you have internet. You have a laptop. You have a camera. You have English speaking native skills. Find a way to use what you have. Start with that.
This is so amazing. This story is so inspiring.
Oh.
Like, were you surprised that at yourself, did you know that you had that in you? Do you know what I mean?
I love this question. And I haven't told this story in maybe 3 years. So thank you so much for such great questions that allow me to pull into these stories. Cause I'm like, there are a couple times I got choked up, but I like swallowed it because, I'm
No,
revisiting.
please. This is amazing.
I'm revisiting that scared, broke, lonely version of myself that had no other option. So that fear, that surprise of like, oh shit, it's working. Like, I don't even think I could afford to panic. When I tell you I was so broke, like I couldn't even afford to like worry. Glo fucking figured it. Like there's a version of me that when you are desperate and you have no other options, and I didn't want to be that person that was like, calling family members and friends, like, hey, can you send me 20? No,
Yeah.
Glo, you're in fucking Barcelona while your friends are working cubicle jobs. You already are kind of living a dream. So like, no, they will not have pity on you that you're broke right now.
And then,
So I didn't feel like I was entitled to success or entitled to ease. I was willing to work, sweat, and cry my way in the beginning because I'm like, okay, all I need is today. If I don't eat today, fuck it. I just need a bed. And I can do like a 5 euro
wow.
hostel bed. And they would be like 24 bed dorms, mixed dorms, people fucking across the room. And I have to like be up at 4 a.m. and listen to their sounds. And I'm like, man, this sucks. I can't even sleep. It's a mess. But I'm like, it's a bed and it's enough. And I was willing to go through those humbling seasons because I knew that nothing would be forever. And if I just allowed myself to keep going, quitting was the only way I was going to fail. There was never going to be a day where I call my mom and I was like, you were right. I should have been a doctor. And even the day where I told her I make more than the top doctor, top surgeon in this country, she was like, well, have you looked at lawyers? You can still be a lawyer. If you look at what lawyers can make off a big allegation trial, I'm like, yo, it was never about the money. It's the title. It's the status.
Yeah.
It's the bragging rights.
It's also, yeah. I feel like there's this, I don't know if this is true in the Nigerian culture, but in Korea, even though I had a business that was doing like 7-figure and, one of the top agencies in New York, like when she talks to her friends she just became a doctor or a lawyer or a judge, she's like, so-and-so this, so-and-so this. She was actually embarrassed of me. She's like, my son is just a web designer. I'm like, what?
Wow. Come on.
I feel like, but that's kind of how to them, that's the thing, right? That's in Korea that like showing face for your family, right? Like you're making a family look bad. That type of thing is like a very real thing.
That's exactly it. And like in our parents' time, they can't conceptualize like a web designer living a good life. Like, a doctor, you say doctor, no matter what country, people are like, ooh, doctors, they make this. Any country, lawyers, they make this. Web designer, oh, freelancer, struggling, oh, agency. Oh. There's such a range of how well a web designer can do. And so there's no there's no strength to the title.
They're like, oh yeah, my friend's nephew does that from his basement. I'm like, what?
Exactly. Put some respect on my name. Yeah.
Yeah. So that dark kind of phase or period in your life.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that again in your life in the future?
At least once a year, maybe once a quarter, I want to quit everything. Even now, like, I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I'm just like, yeah, I'll keep doing this for 10 years. Like, I think I'm always going to be challenging myself to dream bigger or do different, just by nature of never feeling satisfied and by trauma of immigration.
But I feel like you probably have the confidence to know that, if I change something, it might, start something new, or that I'll figure it out or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to have the repetition. Like some of my clients, if I'm helping them build their first digital product, sometimes what I tell them, I'm like, it's not about how much you make off this digital product. It's the confidence you buy yourself by knowing you can complete at least one thing and that it's out in the public for sale. Because we are like waiting for the confidence, we're waiting for the clarity, we're waiting for the burst of inspiration, that 4 a.m. wake up where we're like, yeah, today's the day. none of it happens the way we envision it. We have over romanticized entrepreneurship to be this like glittery path of like inspiration and motivation. And most of the time you are like self-loathing and doubtful and fearful and annoyed. And it's like you have to love the transformation and the impact more than you identify with the comfort and convenience of staying small. That was good.
Yeah, that's really good. You said that perfectly. I also feel like because I met some people who have this confidence, like that I can figure it out. And I feel like you definitely have that. And maybe it's from hearing your story, it sounds like you've had these mini moments, even in college and things like that, where you try something, you've succeeded, and you got validation from it. And when you have enough of that, I think at some point you build a confidence like, okay, I can figure that out. Something like that. Yeah.
That's so true. And I think like in between that, like when I was knocking door to door and like, building my blog and then teaching English lessons, I remember there started to be this like surge of like, what did they call it? Social media was kind of kicking off. This is now 2014. Social media is like brands and companies are recognizing the power of hiring millennials to run their social media accounts. And then these travel companies are also scouting for people to be travel ambassadors and travel hosts for their company. So I'm applying to at least 100. There were at least 100. I got none of them. And then it wasn't until like a year later, I landed my first not brand deal, but like travel gig. And it was only for 3 months. And then I repitched them a 1-year ambassadorship. But it's like, in spite of like those 100 rejections of like being a travel, because my blog was still bland. I was still figuring out personal branding and marketing. And so I think that I had enough rejections to also have that fear and like self-doubt loom over me. I just always kept in mind, I think this is what kept me going, that like the life that I am building is going to be so unique, so fun, so different, so rare. It's going to require a superhuman level of productivity and self-belief, because not everyone can say that they've traveled to 100 countries and 6 continents by the age of 30. Like, that's a fucking privilege. And when I did it, I was like, yeah, that's why I slept on a park bench when I ran out of money. That's why I went 3 days without eating when I ran out of money. Like, I was willing, and I didn't let that like be the end of my story.
Wow, that's you've literally like faced so many of these like moments. I feel like those are the moments that made you strong and have that grit to be able to send out 100 requests like every day. And
there were so many times I'll look back at my story. I'm like, the average person, the sane person would have quit here. Like, I can trace all the times a normal person should quit. Like, doctors would prescribe them to quit because it's like, it doesn't make sense. Nothing I was doing made sense, but I just had so much like young, naive determination that like, fuck it, I'm going to figure it out. Screw it. Like, okay, this didn't work. Okay. If all 20 of these brands, all of them ghosted me, it's not the brands, it's me. Change the wording, try another 20, like rinse and repeat.
Oh, wow. So that's actually super important, that iteration of like, you're not just blindly something, like you're actually like learning from it, and which is kind of like what social media is like too, right? You post and you kind of figure it out. And also like something you mentioned that I hear from a lot of high performers is that they have this delusion of confidence that I'll figure it out, but at the same time they have this daily imposter syndrome, be like why I'm not good enough. And I think that balance is what makes you jump into something and then try to improve, because you have that little bit of the imposter syndrome.
That's huge. I think like it's nice because I think it keeps you humble. Like, having the delusional confidence keeps you going, but having that imposter syndrome keeps you humble. And we've seen those big-headed creators or artists or musicians, and we're sick of them. Like, ugh, get over yourself, So it's like they don't have any imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. It's just all delusional confidence.
Yes.
Or like some people only have imposter syndrome, so they don't even start. So I feel like the combination is actually very rare, and it sounds like you have that.
Yeah, I feel very grateful. Yeah, because now that you're putting it that way, and just working with hundreds of clients directly, tens of thousands indirectly, I just see how many people are in their own way. They just don't believe in themselves. They don't feel worthy of more.
Let's talk about from that point on, when you started traveling till now. How has your life changed? What are some big life lessons you learned throughout this period?
Yeah, it's incredible. So for the next, when I get that first brand deal and I negotiate my way, and then Snapchat is like the first platform I was able to fully monetize. The Tourism Board of Germany paid me $3,000 to Snapchat their country for a week. Think of Instagram stories didn't exist. So it's just me being like, and this is this, and this is this. It was a dream at the time because I still felt like I didn't know my rate or my value. And I'm going to shout her out and the company as well, because I'm going to shout her out, not the company, just in case she gets in trouble. But her name is Tika, and bless her heart, because she was the first person that mirrored my value. At the time, I was doing a lot of ghostwriting and guest blogging on other platforms and directing them to my blog to help with my traffic and SEO strategy. And this company reached out and they saw that my blogging and writing style was very humorous, personality driven, and relatable. And they're like, we'd love to hire you to write 4 articles for our company. And you'll get full attribution and we'll link to your blog. I was like, oh my gosh, great. And my value in my head at the time, because the value of $1 was so high. When I tell you I could live off of $20 for 2 weeks, I learned to stretch $1. Because at this point, now I'm pitching hostels and I'm saying, I'll tag your social media, I'll run your reception. Okay, this part is illegal, but I'm going to say it because fuck it. I'm like, I'll work your reception. Don't pay me, but just don't charge me. I just need a free bed. So I'll work their reception. I'm checking guests in. I'm taking down their passport details. I'm working the computer. I'm like an employee, but they're not paying me. So it's volunteer based. So I don't have any expenses outside of food. And I'm staying in one country, kind of slowly traveling.
I just want to quickly mention to everyone who's complaining about they don't have money, listen to this.
Oh, I was stressed. I think that the more money we make, the more we lose sight of the value of $1. So at that point, $1 was a lot for me. So I thought my value was $100 per article. 50 was my going rate. 100, I felt I hope they say yes. Meanwhile, multi-million-dollar company in revenue annual, but I'm just humble me who I don't need much. I just need food. And so I offer 100, and this woman, she who's working for the company, she doesn't email me back in the company email. She sends me a private email through her personal email. And she was like, Glo, I have never met a writer like you. I've never met a personality like you. I know that this is not how our company operates, but here's what I'm going to give you $4,000 because every single article that you can write for us is worth $1,000. And I just want you to know, I can see our budget. I can see our numbers. Here's what I can actually pay you. And I want you to run forward or move forward with this number in mind, knowing that this is what you're worth.
Wow.
I don't have, to this day, I don't think I can ever thank her enough, because all I needed was one person to reflect and mirror what was possible. I'm blindly moving step at a time, but my thinking was so limited. I was just trying to afford the next day. Just try to afford the next week. I wasn't thinking about affording the next quarter, because $4,000, I could live off of that for a year, even. And so she just expanded my perception of what was possible. And I was like, shit, I needed that. So I'm so emotional. I'm so honored. And I go above and beyond. I now go on this, I'm tagging the company more than what they paid for. I'm like, this company is so great. I'm giving them all these free, because I was just stop, they're paying me so much. I was so grateful. Okay, so wow, I guess... go ahead.
No, because I was going to say, one of the things I noticed with my employees is that the importance of one person believing in you, how much perception that can change. And for her to do, I'm sure it wasn't even for her. It wasn't even a huge thing. But then the impact that small gesture had on you is tremendous. Yeah.
Oh my, who would have known adding 10 would change my life that much? Yeah. And so for the next, 5 to 7 years, I'm like starting to learn my value. I start charging 4 figures and then 5 figures. And then I land my first 6 figure brand ambassadorship. And I'm getting really crafty now with like how I'm working with these companies. I'm now liaisoning for some of them. Like if they want to hire other travel bloggers, I now source the travel bloggers for them. I do the intercommunication. So I'm kind of like working as an agency, like, but not even knowing it.
Wow.
But like I start building all of these incredible connections and I become like the go-to girl for like, oh, if you need a great personality, Glo. If you need a great writer, Glo. And I just built such a great reputation that I just get hired, like booked back to back to back. I could be flown from Hawaii to Finland to Bali to South Africa in a week. And like, it'll be like 70,000 in a week that I make from all of these jobs, all of them paying for the flights, all of them paying for 5-star accommodation, all of them just taking care and then paying for the work on top of it. So all inclusive, but then also paying for the articles, the photos, the mentions, the social media, like,
what is the timeline there? How long from that $3,000 to $4,000 thing till you're just all over the world, just
I would say within the next year, I would say 9 to 12 months, I started to learn to stack that. Yeah, I'm a fast learner, and because
that was a key moment for you.
It changed everything. Because I no longer could look at opportunities the same. I didn't realize I could negotiate. I was so full of humility and gratitude. I didn't know that if someone offers, 500, I could ask for 5,000 just to see if they had it. And also because it's like every company is going to have a different budget. But if you know your value and you establish what I call a get out of bed price, then you know what you could say yes or no to. But at the time I wasn't paying rent. I didn't have a mortgage. I had my cell phone bill and Spotify Premium. That was it.
Spotify Premium got on that.
That was like, I could go broke, but I'm paying for Spotify Premium. So I remember just like living in the countries they would send me. So if I had a job in Latvia, I would just get an Airbnb in Latvia for 2 weeks until the next job was like, and here was another thing I learned. They are so last minute and so unorganized. Like, hey, we're shooting a campaign next week. Can we fly you out in the next 48 hours? I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it. So I'm like, I was living this, like, it felt like a rock star lifestyle, just not even able to take it all in. It's all happening so fast. And then it all comes to a halt in 2019. I have a medical issue and I'm in the country of Malta. Yeah. And I have this, like, I didn't know what to call it at the time, but it felt like I was just like really bloated and I had a lot of stomach pain. And women, it's Women's Health Month right now in May, but like women, we sometimes grow fibroids and cysts and they grow on our ovaries and there's no causation. It just happens like 7 to 10%.
My girlfriend had that, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so common. And so mine was growing so large, I started to get afraid, but then one day it would like shrink. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm fine. And so I tried to change up my diet. I thought it was inflammation from like glucose or bread. What's the other G word? Gluten. I said glucose. Gluten. I thought I had a gluten allergy. This is 2019. And it eventually got to the point where my stomach was just like, it was punching. It was so bad. And it was so like almost, it felt like overnight, it just increased to the point where when I went in to get a scan, they said if they didn't know any better, they would think I'm 7 months pregnant. And I actually have an Instagram post that's going to go up like today or tomorrow that recaps this story. And so they're like, this cyst is so large, you're pushing all your other organs out of the way. And you could like potentially bleed to death internally if this ruptures. Like we needed to have an emergency operation. And all of a sudden I'm just like, how did I get here? Like I'm living this high life, jet setting, not even realizing how much it's wreaking havoc on my health and my body. And so I'm like having to make these quick decisions, show my insurance. And they're like, oh yeah, final question. We'll do the operation tomorrow, but what's your insurance look like in terms of transporting your body? We've never operated on a cyst this large. So if you don't make it, like, where do we send your body? What's the address? Who do we call? And it was so nonchalant. It didn't hit me how fucked up of a situation it was. And when I tell you that was my lowest, like complete suicidal thoughts, complete spiral, complete hopelessness, not even knowing what call do I make? What do I tell my mother who is like waiting for a moment for me to like fuck up? You know, who's the first phone call I make? How do I even, what's the context of that? It just happened. And so I'm like in tears. And of course, you know, all mothers have a heart. And so I call my mom crying, and she's on the first flight to Malta to make it just in time for the surgery. And she's like, you could just see, you know, the motherly love of like, I can't lose my baby. So that was really heartwarming. And it was in that moment where I kind of like, I had to break my business to rebuild it in a more sustainable way. And that's when I leaned more into coaching. I considered myself a closet coach since 2015, because coaching for me, I still didn't understand it, but I knew I was doing it. I was coaching other, I was like coaching other travel bloggers and business owners on how to, you know, leverage social media strategy and storytelling. It was nothing official. It was just like they would DM me and I would give them a Zoom link and we would just like figure something out. So I continued with this like format. And so when I got to this point, I was like, I have to rebuild my identity. Like if I make it out, like I'm not doing anything the same. And I leaned more into impact versus like showing myself in these exotic countries just, you know, to spark envy. Like what am I really doing? Yes, I could inspire people to travel, but ultimately it was an empty pursuit. It didn't feel like enough. And so I really leaned into.
Go ahead. Do you think the fact that you had that period where you had to stop is what made you realize it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest blessing in disguise in hindsight. Like it forced me to reevaluate everything I was doing and try something different, because I no longer attached my identity to my ability to travel. I now wanted to attach it to like the depth of the ways that I could help people.
I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, continue. Sorry. Sorry to
No, you're good. And yeah, and I think that was the year also like met Brendan Burchard. Next year met Mel Robbins, Gabby Bernstein. Like I just started to like ascend into those spaces. I was like, oh, okay, this new version of me is actually more impactful and more desirable, or more helpful, more resourceful. So that was also really cool, because I also felt like I reached a peak with my impact with travel blogging.
You feel like you found more of a fulfillment in the coaching space than your previous?
Yeah. Oh yeah, more purpose, more fulfillment, and even like the oh my God, excuse me. Sorry, I tried to.
No worries.
That one. The caliber of clients I was working with, like I also felt like they were on the same wavelength of seeking purpose and mission-based businesses. And so it just felt like I was more aligned in that season.
And during that period, from then, I guess, till now, what are some false beliefs that you used to believe in that you think you don't, you stop believing?
The first one I think of is like chase the fulfillment and the purpose and the happiness first, and the money will almost always follow. And because like freedom was like my North Compass and uniqueness and creative expression, it didn't matter how broke I was. I could be pinching my pennies in Paris, but I still felt like I was able to build a unique brand because I did it in a way that leveraged my joy and my happiness. And so I was able to, I still do like, I'll combine coaching with travel trips with my boot camps and retreats. And so I was able to find a pocket of impact that I can do in a specific way that I love as well. So if people can like chase the joy, fulfillment, and happiness first, the money, I promise it will come.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's something you mentioned before about when you were in the hospital, like having to call your mom who's waiting for you to fail. Now, is that something that was always in your mind? That was there a part of you that like, I need to prove this to my mom? Do you understand what I mean?
I think spite is the greatest motivator of all time, for sure. Like I'd work hard. I'll work harder to prove someone wrong than to prove myself right every time. 10 out of 10 times.
But what happened when when she came to see you at the hospital, because like that moment must have been like, maybe I don't need to
Yeah,
prove to her. So, you know what I mean? Like,
I gotcha. You know, the interesting thing about medical trauma is it strips away all of the anger, the guilt, the shame, all the things that have led people to complicated relationships. And I know many people have complicated relationships with their parents, mothers specifically, and immigrant kids specifically as well, you know. And I think in that moment, of course, everything is dropped because now it all that matters is that I'm alive and I survived this surgery, which is very invasive. Like I still to this day have a scar. They cut me wide open, like just stomach split in half. Like it was very, yeah, very invasive surgery. So it was high risk, and they didn't have much confidence either. They were honest about they knew how to operate on cysts and fibroids, but they've never operated on one this large, which was 28 centimeters. And so it just, I didn't have much confidence in them because they didn't have confidence in themselves. So all you care about in that moment is expressing your love for each other, you know, and apologizing for any pain you've caused. But your wall is dropped momentarily. Now they say all good things must come to an end, and that season came to an end.
before we talked about kind of like when you disabled your DM, can we talk about
Yeah.
that? Like what made you make that decision, and how has it been?
As a recovering people pleaser, I think there is this obligation that I always felt to make everyone happy and satisfied with any interaction they have with me. It would be irresponsible of me to pretend that you can build a personable and relatable business without responding to people. So in that first 7, 8 years of being on Instagram, maybe even 10 years on Instagram, I responded to every DM. I responded to every comment because that's what I thought I had to do to keep their loyalty and to feel like I was being a good person. And then eventually you get to a point where you have to, Glennon Doyle would always say, either you disappoint others or you disappoint yourself. And when I open Instagram and I would feel this immediate anxiety because if I open my DMs, I could expect people to ask for favors, GoFundMe links of strangers, people asking me to coach them for free. Like I didn't know how to separate like all of that. So I just had to get to a place where I'm like, Glo, you're growing and you deserve boundaries that allow you to keep Instagram as a space of, yeah, equal engagement. Like no one, friends have access to you because they have your number, but no one is allowed to just demand things from you in the DMs. So I just had to like make a stance, and I'm sure I upset people, and I'm
Yeah,
happy that I didn't upset myself.
yeah, and I'm sure you didn't upset them that much, right? Because it's not like they're not expecting to, have that relationship with you. Like like they know that your audience size is.
Well, that's what you think. I mean, I've got an email before, like, I've been trying to DM you. Did you block me? What happened? And, I thought you were the, oh, I've gotten those emails for sure.
Oh
So
wow.
absolutely. The entitlement will
Yeah.
always be there. Oh my goodness.
Wow, that's so true. Like in any relationship, when you give too much, sometimes they kind of take it for granted, right? Like,
Yeah, because it was a favor, not an expectation. Like
mm,
it's a favor that I open your DM and I respond to you with a thoughtful multi-paragraph response.
mm,
Like that's a favor. That's not an obligation.
yeah. So how is it now? How's your life now? Because I know you're a lot less like in terms of like the content and social media. You're not as active as you used to be, and
Yeah.
and you've obviously found love, and that part that part has also, I'm sure, has a big impact. So do you want to quickly talk about that?
Yeah. So I started to recognize that Instagram, like you could post on Monday and they'll still be showing your content on people's feeds until Wednesday or Thursday. So Instagram is no longer prioritizing quantity. Like if it's quality content, it could stretch for a couple weeks even. So there's no need to have this rat race of like, I got to post 6 times a day and, that's expired coaching and information. So I recognize that like I enjoy showing up from a place of like, I have something to say, versus I'm posting to be consistent and I'm posting for posting's sake, I'll disappear for a month and live my best life in Puerto Rico and then come back, with some messages. But I like to share with substance. I don't like to share to just take up people's time and space. And I think as you grow and as you evolve and as you have even different influences and inspirations on what you want to talk about, you're also going to navigate a different cadence of how frequently you have to show up. Because I have so many like ways that I can engage with my community in a paid container, they get my all. They get my daily engagement. They like, and I enjoy that because they've been vetted and I actually like enjoy responding to them. But I don't owe anyone on social media anything. Like, it's a gift for people to share their story and it's an art. So I just have to always like allow myself to remember that no matter what we owe to the world is our authentic selves showing up in full, courageous, brave expression. But what we do not owe to anyone is direct access to us. I don't know when it became a thing for every social media platform to activate direct messaging, but it's too much. I'm easy to find, but I'm hard to reach. You can find me on any social platform, but you will not reach me because what? It doesn't create a place of healthy boundaries, just unhealthy expectations from the consumer.
Okay, that's super helpful because I think a lot of us feel that way where we feel like we need to constantly engage and constantly like feed the beast, and it's like it's so like that's how most of us get burnout, right? So this is going to be my final question. From your entire life story and all the lessons that you've learned, and when you watch your audience, when you coach people, when you look at most people, what would you say is the most common misbelief that they believe that you wish you can just go in their brain and be like, and just turn the switch so that they can debunk that myth? You know what I mean?
Yeah, what a great question. I think we've created a story of how hard things are. And yes, there is an element of it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes trial and error, but we make it harder than it actually needs to be. We say that we want more clients, but we're not willing to post. We say that we want to make more money, but we don't want to create an offer or a digital product. We say we want change, but we don't change our habits. Like, we really have to be honest about what the actual resistance is: fear, rejection, isolation, doubt, insecurity. Like, name it and shame it. Like, it doesn't have to be as big as we make it. So if we get clearer about what's the actual thing I'm running away from, and then we do that self work, maybe in therapy, to like heal that thing and minimize its actual impact and presence in our life, we can transfer it into our business and do incredible things.
That's so amazing because I feel like we all have that one thing that we don't even know what we're running away from, right? Until like we do the work. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
Where do you want people to find you if they want to work with you? Where do they go?
Yeah, so Instagram, that's where you can get the most of me, probably on any social platform. Glo Graphics, GLO Graphics. And then if you'd like to work with me, I host these 12-month mentorship programs that include coaching, curriculum, community, and an in person mastermind at thelifeleap.com.
And if you join the mentorship, be prepared to cry.
Yeah, yeah. Touche.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Thank you for this amazing conversation, Glo. Hope
So fun.
we see you around. Thank you, everyone. Till next week, and I'll see
Yes.
you all next week.
Bye, everyone.